Howdy everyone, welcome back to Wobble Enjoy Sports. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider to like the content and subscribe to the channel. But if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. Let's have a gaze at the Parramatta Eels fixture for 2024. Pre-season challenge for the Parramatta Eels is as follows. Game number 1 emanates from Cogra. They are taking on the Canberra Raiders. In week number 2, they are away to the Gold Coast Titans, playing up at North Ipswich Reserve, up here in Ipswich, Queensland. Random old little trip to Queensland for the Parramatta Eels. Pretty rare, I would say. And that's just about the biggest game in Ipswich for almost a decade, I'd say. So it's going to be the Raiders and the Titans for the Parramatta Eels in the pre-season challenge, kicking off next week. Wowee. The Parramatta Eels' first 5 weeks for the 2024 season, or the first phase for their year, is as follows. Their year kicks off with a home fixture against the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, Saturday 5:30 p.m. Round number 2, they travel out west to take on the Penrith Panthers at Bluebet Stadium for Friday night football. Then they have a long break between games, about a 9-day break, until they take on the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles Sunday afternoon football at 3 p.m, which is the start of a back-to-back home fixture for the Eels. So it's Manly on the Sunday, and then on Good Monday, in round number 4, they host the West Tigers, Monday 3 p.m. at CommBank Stadium. Round number 5, to round out their first phase, they travel down to Canberra to take on the Raiders at GIO Stadium. It is a Sunday twilight fixture for the Parramatta Eels. That's a pretty nice way to start the year for the Eels, in comparison, especially in comparison to the way that their fixture was at the start of the 2023 season. That was horrific. This is a hell of a lot nicer. They have 3 home games inside the first 5 weeks. They don't leave Sydney for the first 4 weeks of the season until they have to quickly zip down to take on the Raiders. That game against the Panthers obviously is the big one for them. We're going to find out a hell of a lot about the Eels' chances very early on in the season when they do take on their rivals. The Eels last year defeated the Panthers twice. If they can stay at the very least in touching distance of the Panthers, even with a loss, it should spell some really nice hope for them, because best case scenario they go 5-0, but this first 5-week period could be a 4-win 1-loss phase for the Parramatta Eels. They could be looking at a brilliant start to the season right here. Section 2 of 2024 is as follows. They start with a home game against the North Queensland Cowboys, Saturday twilight fixture. In round number 7, they take another home game up to TO Stadium this year, but this time they will host the Dolphins, Friday night football in TO Stadium. So a short-ish turnaround for the Parramatta Eels. In round number 8, 1 week later, Friday night football, they play against the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles at 4 Pines Park. So that's the double done. That is the double done against the Sea Eagles for 2024 early on. Then they have a bye. Comes in round number 9. Their first bye comes in round 9. In round 10, they're back at home at CommBank Stadium for the first time in 3 or 4 weeks. They host the Brisbane Broncos. Round 10, Channel 9 Friday night football. Again, that's maybe a little bit of my bias is showing here. I think that is a lot more difficult a phase section for the Parramatta Eels to navigate. I know they still technically have 3 home games in amongst that, one of them being up in Darwin, but the strength of opposition is much larger, or looms larger rather. The Broncos are coming to town, the Dolphins could be anything up in Darwin in particularly, and the same thing could be said about the North Queensland Cowboys as well. So besides, and plus you've got the 2 competition points as well for the bye as well there for the Parramatta Eels. Yeah, this is definitely a lot trickier, but that round 10 clash, if the Eels could find themselves to be something along the lines of like a 6-2 or something like that, I think my maths might be a little bit off there, but if they could be a 5-3 or a 6-2 going into that game against the Brisbane Broncos, that's going to be a massive game. Section 3 for 2024 is as follows. They hop on the plane to play the Melbourne Storm at Suncorp Stadium, Channel 9 Sunday afternoon football. So they've had about 9 days rest in between their last game, and this is a part of Magic Round in round number 11. It's the marquee game of the Sunday day fixtures for Magic Round. In round number 12, they're still away, but they're back in Sydney, and even though the stadium has not been allocated yet, it looks like that on Saturday night football they will play away to the South Sydney Rabbitohs and play at Allianz Stadium. But this time last year they played South Sydney at Allianz Stadium and they walloped them, and sort of that was the game that condemned the South Sydney Rabbitohs for 2023. They then have a short turnaround where they host the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks on Thursday night football. So that's probably the shortest turnaround for the Eels thus far. They host the Sharks on Thursday night football after playing the Rabbitohs on a Saturday night fixture. And then in round number 14, they have the King's birthday public holiday match where they travel to a core stadium, or they just skip to a core stadium to play the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. And that game is just, it's a bit of a, how do you call it? Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs tends to lift for those sorts of games, so that could be anything, and they did smash the Eels actually a couple of seasons ago in a massive upset. In round number 15, to round out their third section for 2024, they host the Sydney Roosters at CommBank Stadium, and those games against the Roosters over the past 3 years in particularly have been humdingers. They've been pretty fiery, intense, entertaining clashes. So from round 11 through to round 15, they do not have any buys. It's just a one trip to Queensland, but the strength of opposition is tricky as buggery. It's getting a little bit harder as the season goes along for the Parramatta Eels, just quietly. So they play the Storm at Suncorp, at Storm's second home. They take on South Sydney, Sharks, Bulldogs, and the Roosters. Origin has kicked off in this phase, so players could be missing for either side. Injuries might be about as well. But yeah, that's probably the trickiest part of their year to date so far. Phase 4 starts with the Eels' second bye for the season. In round 17, they return to action, but it's away from home. They travel up to Newcastle to take on the Knights, Saturday 5:30 p.m. kickoff. They then have another short-ish turnaround against the South Sydney Rabbitohs, but at home at CommBank Stadium, Thursday night football against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Then they have a 8-9 day rest until they take on the Gold Coast Titans up at Cbus Super Stadium, Saturday 5:30 p.m. And then their fourth phase finishes with their third and final buys. The Parramatta Eels run to the finals starts in round number 21, fresh off the back of the bye. It is all systems go, all eyes ahead, and they are the prime time Friday night football Parramatta Eels from round 21 through to 25, where they have 5 straight Friday night games in a row. So no short turnarounds, no nothing like that. But it's the strength of opposition here that is really, really telling. So in round 21, they host the Melbourne Storm on Friday night football. They are then away to the New Zealand Warriors at Go Media Stadium for Friday night footy. And that, I think, I might need to be corrected, but I feel like that is going to be the first time in 6 years, like a long time, since the Parramatta Eels last played at Go Media Stadium. Round number 23, They host their rivals, Penrith Panthers. Round 24, they play at Allianz Stadium against the Eastern Suburbs, and it is the start of a back-to-back away feature for the Parramatta Eels, because in round 25, they play the Broncos at Suncorp. Then they're back home in front of their home fans for round 26 on Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff at CommBank Stadium, and they take on the St. George Illawarra Dragons, and their final regular season game is away. They take on the West Tigers out at Campbelltown Sports Stadium, Friday, 6 p.m. kickoff there. Those final two rounds, with all due respect to the Dragons and who I think will be much more improved, the West Tigers, those two games could be good for the Eels. They could nab those two victories there, but that run to the finals from round 21 through to 25 is enormous. As a matter of fact, they only have 3 home games in the final 7 weeks of the regular season, and again, 5 straight weeks in a row, they take on the Storm, Warriors, Panthers, Roosters, and Broncos. Wowee, man. Wowee. So this season, in my opinion, it might be controversial, it might be a bold call, but there is a massive chance lying in wait for the Eels where they could be 5-0 at the end of their first phase. And I say that with the knowledge that we've all got. They defeated the Penrith Panthers twice last year, and I know they've got to travel out to Penrith this year, again in that early feature, but they know that they can do it, and they've got the team to give others massive headaches. I think they've got a massive opportunity to go 5-0 because their draw just gets harder and harder and harder. In my opinion, there is a little bit of a lapse in opposition about 3 quarters through the regular season, but then it's ramped right back up again with that run to the finals. That, in particularly, that 5-week stretch fresh off their bye, and that bye comes at a beautiful time considering what is going to face them, because that's just about death row. If they're sitting in about 11th position going into round number 21. So really the most important parts of their season are the bookends. It's all bookended with what I think is a pretty nice, I don't want to use the word soft because there's no such thing as a soft draw, but they got a really nice draw inside the first 5 weeks where they can beat any of those 5 teams. But if they don't, if they have themselves a 2-3 or even a 3-2, they then have a tougher and tougher fixture, and it's rounded out by that 5-week stretch after the bye. I can't reiterate that anymore. That is a huge part for the Parramatta Eels. They would need to win 3 of those games, I'd reckon, considering how tight the competition is going to be this season. Eels in that 5-week stretch, you would think would have to win 3 of those games to keep themselves above water. Eels, I do think they are a chance for top 8, but I'll reveal my latter predictions on a later date. That is, it's not the easiest draw, but it's not the hardest draw, I must say. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I hope you're enjoying it. I'll talk to you guys later. Take care. Adios.